Long before modern machinery, ancient engineers reshaped entire continents using only water and wisdom. This is the untold story of Bronze Age hydraulics, a time when human ingenuity first began to literally move mountains. You are about to discover how these forgotten masters transformed hostile landscapes into cradles of civilization using nothing but gravity, observation, and simple bronze tools. How did they build vast irrigation networks that fed millions without any maps or measuring devices? What hidden principles allowed their water systems to function for centuries? By the end of this journey, you will see the ancient world through the eyes of its greatest engineers, understanding the secrets that allowed them to turn deserts into gardens and swamps into cities. Their story raises a profound question about our own relationship with the planet. How much can we truly learn from the patience of the past? This was a world caught between the forces of nature and the spark of human ambition. Across vast regions, rainfall patterns grew unpredictable, turning reliable rivers into volatile forces. Some landscapes became lush with unexpected moisture, while others baked under prolonged dry spells. These were not gentle changes, but powerful shifts that threatened the very foundation of emerging communities. The response to this environmental pressure became the defining struggle of the era. Societies found themselves at a crossroads where mastering water meant the difference between flourishing and fading away. The transition from scattered villages to dense urban centers created a new kind of demand. A small settlement could rely on a local spring, but a city of thousands needed a constant, predictable supply for drinking, sanitation, and most importantly, for feeding its population. This scale of need demanded a new kind of thinking. The tools available seem almost humble to our modern eyes. There were no steel alloys, no complex machinery, only bronze saws, wooden sledges, and the immense power of coordinated human effort. Yet with these simple instruments, they conceived and built works that would endure for centuries. Their true innovation was not in the hardness of their metal, but in the sharpness of their observation. They learned to read the land like a map, understanding how water naturally wants to flow, and then gently guiding it to serve their needs. This profound partnership with the landscape itself is what we must grasp to see their genius clearly. The genius of these early systems lay in their elegant simplicity. Without a single moving part or need for external power, the entire network operated on one unshakable law, that water always flows downhill. This was their engine, gravity itself. Their challenge was not to fight this force, but to guide it with impossible precision across miles of unpredictable terrain. Using tools that seem almost childlike today, a set of aligned poles and a water level which was essentially a trough of water to find a true horizontal, they performed feats of surveying that would challenge modern engineers. The goal was a slope so gradual, so perfectly calculated, that the water would neither stall nor erode its own channel. A drop of just a few fingers in height for every 100 paces of distance could mean the difference between a thriving city and a barren field. Can you picture the patience required, marking that gentle descent from a mountain spring all the way to a sun-baked plain? They were not just digging ditches, they were drawing lines of life across the map. This foundational skill, the mastery of simple hydraulics, unlocked a new relationship with the environment. It gave them the confidence to attempt projects of staggering scale, to believe they could truly command the flow of a continent. But how did they manage water when there was too much of it, when the gentle flow became a destructive torrent? Their greatest teacher was not a person, but the landscape itself. These early engineers spent years simply watching water, learning its language and its habits. They saw how a river never takes a straight path, but curves and bends to slow its own force and protect its banks. They noticed how seasonal floods left behind a layer of rich, dark soil, a gift of fertility carried from distant mountains. So instead of forcing water into rigid, straight-line canals, they designed their channels with gentle, meandering curves. This was not a random choice. By mimicking a natural river's path, they achieved two vital goals. The water moved slowly enough to deposit its precious silt directly onto the farmlands, naturally fertilizing the crops without any human effort. And the curves prevented the water from gaining destructive speed, which protected their carefully built earthworks from being washed away. They were borrowing designs that nature had perfected over millennia. This deep observation extended to the animal kingdom as well. They saw how beavers could transform entire creeks with their cleverly placed dams, creating ponds that sustained entire ecosystems. They studied the way an oxbow lake forms when a river abandons a loop, leaving a calm, sheltered body of water. These natural models became blueprints for their own structures. They built weirs and diversion dams that functioned much like a beaver's work, pooling water without completely stopping a river's flow. They created settling basins that mimicked the quiet waters of an oxbow, allowing sediment to drop out before the clear water continued onto the cities. This entire approach was a form of ancient wisdom, a partnership with the environment. They asked not how they could conquer a river, but how they could work with it. The resulting systems were not just effective, they were resilient and self-sustaining, often lasting for centuries with minimal maintenance. This respectful, observant approach to shaping the world offers a powerful lesson that resonates even in our modern age, reminding us that the most elegant solutions are often those already written into the land. But observation alone could not move mountains of earth. A third, crucial element was required: a mastery of mass labor and social organization on an almost unimaginable scale. The true marvel of this work lies in the tools themselves, a collection of seemingly simple objects that together could reshape a continent. Picture a bronze-tipped pickaxe, its edge carefully alloyed for strength, biting into sun-baked earth. Teams of workers would use these to break ground, while others followed with shovels made of wood and bronze to clear the debris. But moving earth is one thing. Transporting the massive stones for canal linings and sluice gates required another level of ingenuity. They turned to physics, employing wooden sledges dragged over wet clay and rows of logs used as rollers to reduce friction. With nothing but ropes made from twisted fibers and the coordinated strength of human teams, they could lever multi-ton blocks into perfect position. The most critical tools, however, were those for measurement. A simple plumb bob, a weight on a string, ensured their walls were perfectly vertical. For the all-important gentle slope of a water channel, they used a brilliant device called a chorobates. This was a long, leveled trough filled with water, acting as a giant spirit level to find a true horizontal across vast distances. Their creativity reached its peak when they used water not just as a resource, but as an active tool. They would channel it to saturate hard, compacted soil, making it easier to dig. There are even indications they built temporary channels to float particularly heavy stones on rafts, letting the water itself do the heavy lifting. This entire toolbox reflects a profound intelligence, a deep understanding of material properties and basic mechanics. They achieved monumental results not through overwhelming force, but through clever application of the principles available to them. It forces us to reconsider what true innovation means. Is it about the complexity of our tools or the depth of our understanding in using them? With these simple yet brilliant implements, they were ready to undertake projects of a scale that is difficult to comprehend even today. Beneath the scorching sun of the Persian plateau, a hidden network of tunnels quietly defied the desert. This was the Qanat, an underground river created by human hands. Persian engineers faced a brutal paradox. Water was often plentiful, but it lay trapped deep beneath the ground or evaporated instantly under the harsh sun. Their solution was one of breathtaking elegance. They decided to bring the mountain spring to the city without ever exposing it to the open air. The process began with the mother well, a shaft dug straight down, sometimes over 100 meters deep, until the diggers finally struck the life-giving water table at the foot of a mountain range. This was the source, the heart of the entire system. From there, teams of workers began the painstaking task of digging a gently sloping tunnel back towards their settlement, far out on the plain. But how could they possibly maintain that perfect, near horizontal slope through miles of solid rock and earth in complete darkness? The answer lay in a series of vertical shafts, dug at precise intervals along the tunnel's path. These shafts served two brilliant purposes. They provided crucial ventilation for the workers below, and most importantly, they acted as a giant measuring device. By checking the depth of each sequential shaft, the engineers could ensure their underground channel was falling at the exact minimal grade required for the water to flow, a drop of perhaps only 1 meter for every 1,000. This was engineering of the highest order, conducted entirely in the dark. The excavated soil from the tunnel was piled in rings around the openings of these shafts, creating the iconic crater-like dots that still mark the path of a Qanat across the landscape today. The result was a self-regulating water delivery system. Cool, clean water flowed continuously from the mountains, shielded from evaporation and contamination, emerging at the surface exactly where it was needed most. This was more than a technical marvel, it was a social revolution. The creation and maintenance of a Qanat demanded unprecedented cooperation across entire communities, leading to some of the world's first formal water-sharing agreements. A single Qanat could sustain a city, turning barren ground into the legendary Persian gardens. The very word paradise finds its roots in these walled oases. The Qanat stands as a timeless lesson in working with the forces of nature, not against them, a testament to the power of quiet, patient ingenuity hidden just beneath the surface. A single Qanat or canal did more than just carry water. It wove together the very fabric of human society. The monumental task of moving earth and stone required a different kind of engineering, one of people and purpose. To coordinate the labor of thousands from different villages and distant clans demanded a new form of organization. For the first time, individual effort had to synchronize into a single, continent-shaping heartbeat. This immense undertaking gave birth to the world's first centralized authorities, the overseers and planners who could manage food, tools, and the complex schedules of a workforce larger than any seen before. Specialized roles emerged from this collective effort: the surveyor who read the lay of the land, the dam keeper who regulated the flow, and the canal inspector who patrolled for breaches. These were not just jobs, they were vital functions that held the entire system and the community it supported together. The shared dependency on managed water created a powerful, unifying purpose. A farmer digging a canal segment understood that his labor ensured his neighbor's harvest, and that his neighbor's labor ensured his own. This mutual reliance became the social glue of the earliest states, binding people through shared need and collective achievement. But with a limited resource like water, cooperation could easily turn to conflict. The question of who gets water, when, and how much demanded answers that were fair, or at least perceived as fair by everyone involved. This pressing need led to one of humanity's most profound social innovations, written law. Some of the world's earliest legal codes are, at their heart, detailed irrigation rights. They carefully outline the responsibilities for maintaining channels and the penalties for stealing water or damaging a neighbor's share. This was the beginning of formalized governance, all flowing from the fundamental need to manage a shared aquatic resource. The landscape was not the only thing being reshaped by these flowing channels. Human society itself was being carved into new forms, creating patterns of cooperation, authority, and law that would define civilization for thousands of years to come. Far to the east, another civilization was mastering water on a city-wide scale. The streets of Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa were not laid out by chance, but according to a grand hydraulic design. Imagine a city where every single house had its own private well, a luxury of fresh water that would be remarkable even in many places today. But the true genius of the Indus Valley people was not just in providing water, it was in managing its departure. The entire urban landscape was threaded with a network of covered drains, built from precisely fitted bricks and equipped with inspection holes for maintenance. This was a sanitation system of stunning foresight, designed to carry wastewater away from homes and public spaces, protecting the health of the entire community. What does this tell us about their society? It reveals a culture that prioritized public well-being and collective planning on a massive scale. Their foresight extended beyond the city walls to confront the challenge of the seasons. They understood that the life-giving monsoon rains were not constant, so they constructed massive reservoirs to capture and store this precious bounty. Canals then channeled this stored water to vast agricultural fields, ensuring a stable food supply for their dense urban populations. This was not a piecemeal effort. The water infrastructure was not added later. It was woven into the very blueprint of the city from its foundation. The placement of every street, every building, and every drain was part of a single, cohesive master plan. At the heart of this hydraulic city stood the Great Bath, a monumental public tank built with watertight bricks and sealed with tar. This structure speaks to a society where water held a central role that went beyond the purely practical. It was a place for ritual, for community gathering, and for a form of public health that integrated the physical and the spiritual. The entire civilization functioned as a single, interconnected hydraulic machine. This level of coordination hints at a highly organized society with a shared vision. One that understood its fate was tied to its relationship with the water that surrounded it. Their legacy is a powerful reminder that the most advanced civilizations are often those that learn to build in partnership with their environment. Yet, for all their sophistication, these great water societies eventually faced their greatest test, a challenge that came not from a lack of water, but from the very landscapes they had so brilliantly engineered. On steep mountainsides where rain would normally wash the soil away in minutes, Bronze Age farmers performed a kind of magic. They carved the slopes into a giant staircase of flat, fertile fields. This was the birth of terracing, a solution that did far more than just create flat land. Each stone-walled level acted as a miniature dam, deliberately slowing the frantic rush of rainwater. Instead of tearing the mountainside apart, the water was forced to pause, to soak in, and to nourish the earth deeply. This was erosion control in its most elegant form, a way of persuading the landscape to hold onto its own life-giving soil. The engineering was deceptively simple yet brilliant, sturdy retaining walls often built from stones cleared from the fields themselves, held back the immense weight of the earth. Then carefully placed drainage channels allowed any excess water to escape slowly from one level to the next, preventing any single terrace from being overwhelmed. This transformed destructive deluges into a gentle, managed trickle, a controlled distribution of moisture that reached the very roots of the crops. What had been barren, unproductive slopes suddenly blossomed into lush, layered farms. You can see this same principle from the breathtaking rice terraces of Southeast Asia, which look like stairways to the sky, to the sun-drenched vineyard steppes of the ancient Mediterranean. In every case, the farmers were not fighting the mountain, they were collaborating with it. They used the land's own contours to their advantage, creating a system that was not only productive but inherently stable and self-sustaining. The enduring beauty of these ancient terraced landscapes today is a powerful testament to their genius. They stand as a quiet reminder that the most effective engineering does not seek to dominate nature, but to work within its patient, enduring rhythms. The channels and reservoirs these engineers built were not just technical achievements, they were acts of profound spiritual conversation. For the people of that era, a river was not a simple flow of water. It was a living god, a powerful and unpredictable entity whose favor could not be taken for granted. Before a single stone was laid for a new canal, priests would perform ceremonies to seek the blessing of the local water deity. The success of an entire project and the survival of the community it served was believed to depend on this sacred permission. This deep spiritual connection transformed engineering into a form of worship, a partnership with the divine forces of the earth. We find clear evidence of this belief in the very foundations of their structures. Archaeologists have uncovered ceremonial deposits buried at the base of ancient dams and sluice gates. These were not simple tokens, but valuable offerings, precious stones, crafted metal objects, and sometimes even food stores, gifts intended to win the favor of the spirit inhabiting the water. The overseer of a major project was often the high priest or the king himself, a figure who embodied both spiritual and earthly authority. This meant that maintaining the canals and keeping the water flowing was not just a matter of civic duty, it was a religious obligation that spanned generations. A community that neglected its waterworks was not merely being lazy, it was risking divine displeasure and the catastrophic withdrawal of nature's bounty. This powerful fusion of faith and function created a powerful incentive for long-term care. It helps explain the immense, sustained collective will required to carve a Qanat through a mountain or to terrace an entire hillside. The work was for the here and now, certainly, but it was also for the gods, a permanent inscription of devotion upon the landscape itself. This spiritual dimension provided the enduring motivation that pure practicality might have lacked, ensuring that these life-giving systems were cherished, maintained, and passed down as a sacred trust. On the sun-drenched island of Crete, the Minoan palaces stood as monuments to a different kind of water mastery. At the heart of their capital, Knossos, engineers wove a hidden network of water channels directly into the palace walls. This was not a system of open canals for fields, but a closed circuit of hydraulic luxury designed for an urban center. They crafted terracotta pipes in interlocking, tapered sections, a brilliant design that created a watertight seal under pressure and allowed for easy maintenance. These pipes channeled fresh spring water from the surrounding hills, delivering it directly to royal apartments, workshops, and even kitchens deep within the multi-storied palace complex. But the true innovation lay in what happened after the water was used. A separate, equally sophisticated network of stone drains ran beneath the floors, carrying wastewater away with remarkable efficiency. This separation of clean and dirty water was a foundational principle of public health that would be forgotten for centuries after the Minoans were gone. Some of their advanced drainage systems even featured settling tanks, where water would slow down and allow solid debris to sink to the bottom before the cleaner liquid continued on its journey, preventing blockages and protecting the entire network. The most startling modern feature found in some quarters were latrines that could be flushed with a pour of water from a jug, a convenience that would vanish from Europe for more than 1,000 years. Yet for the Minoans, water's purpose was not confined to the practical alone. They directed this life-giving resource into beautiful courtyard fountains, creating spaces of cool tranquility and sound. They irrigated palace gardens, blending utility with aesthetic pleasure in a way that reveals a society confident enough to pursue refinement. This holistic approach, where a single hydraulic system served sanitation, daily convenience, and artistic beauty, represents a breathtaking high point of Bronze Age integration. It shows us a civilization that had moved beyond simply managing water for survival. They were using it to cultivate a complete and sophisticated way of life, proving that even the most fundamental resource could be shaped into an expression of culture itself. The greatest challenge was not a lack of water, but its overwhelming power. Living alongside a river like the Tigris or the Nile was a constant negotiation with chaos. These waterways were not merely sources of life, they were untamed forces that could erase a year's harvest in a single, violent surge. The response to this threat gave rise to one of the most critical principles of ancient engineering, the art of flood management. Instead of trying to stop the inevitable, these engineers learned to guide it, to give the river a designated space to express its power without destroying the civilization that depended on it. They built massive earthen levees and embankments, walls of packed earth that acted as a gentle hand on the river's shoulder, containing the seasonal flood within a broad, safe channel. But containment was only half the solution. They also needed a way to release the pressure. Diversion dams and carefully positioned spillways acted as safety valves for the entire system. During a drought, these structures could direct precious water into a network of irrigation canals. When the floods came, the same structures would channel the excess away from vulnerable settlements and into prepared floodplains or natural depressions. This was a dynamic, living system designed to breathe with the rhythm of the seasons. In Egypt, this philosophy reached its zenith with basin irrigation. The entire landscape was transformed into a massive, shallow reservoir. Engineers used the natural contours of the land, reinforcing them with man-made dikes to create a series of vast, level basins. When the Nile swelled with its annual flood, gates were opened to allow the silty water to pour into these basins, where it would be held for over a month. This was a moment of profound transformation. The water was not rushed away. It was given time to slowly soak into the thirsty soil, depositing a fresh layer of incredibly fertile black silt before being gently drained back into the receding river. This annual gift of water and soil required no artificial fertilizers, no complex machinery. It was a perfect, self-renewing agricultural cycle powered by the river's own natural pulse. The entire economy of pharaonic Egypt, the grain that fed its workers and the wealth that built its pyramids, was fundamentally the product of this managed flood. To master such a cycle was the ultimate demonstration of human ingenuity. The moment a civilization stopped seeing a river as a destructive enemy and learned to treat it as a productive, if powerful, partner. This deep understanding of water did not simply appear. It moved from one generation to the next, carried not in books but in the minds and hands of the engineers themselves. In a world before widespread writing, the intricate science of slope and soil was a living tradition, passed from master to apprentice through years of patient, practical training. A young learner would spend countless hours beside his teacher, not just listening but doing. He would feel the correct tension in a surveyor's line, learn to identify stable ground by the color of the earth, and recognize the subtle signs of a weakened canal wall long before it gave way. This knowledge was a form of power, a closely guarded secret often held within specific families or craft guilds. An engineer who could reliably bring water to a king's city commanded immense respect, becoming a figure of such importance that he could travel safely between rival kingdoms, his skills more valuable than any army. The spread of these techniques was a slow, steady current of its own. As trade routes stretched further and empires expanded their borders, the specialized knowledge of water management traveled with them. A technique perfected in one river valley would be carried by a traveling engineer to the next, where it might be adapted to a different soil type or combined with a local innovation. This was not a simple copy, but a continuous process of refinement and improvement, a shared technological heritage built by countless anonymous hands over centuries. The invisible network of practical wisdom connected civilizations across vast distances, ensuring that a brilliant solution born in one place could take root and flourish in another. This legacy of shared knowledge passed through generations was the true foundation upon which all these ancient landscapes were reshaped. High in the fortified citadels of Mycenaean Greece, survival depended on a secret buried deep within the earth. While their towering walls and lion gates projected immense power, their true genius lay hidden underground in colossal cisterns carved from the living rock. Reached by breathtaking stone staircases that descended into darkness, these secret reservoirs guaranteed a continuous water supply even during the most prolonged sieges, when surface springs were poisoned or cut off by an enemy. This was hydrological strategy on a grand scale, turning a citadel's greatest vulnerability into its ultimate strength. But securing water within their walls was only half the battle. Outside, the Mycenaeans confronted a landscape of extremes, where sudden, torrential rains would rush down from the mountains, threatening to wash away everything in their path. Their response was as bold as their architecture. They built formidable dams using a technique known as cyclopean masonry, fitting together enormous, irregular limestone boulders, some weighing several tons, with such precision that they needed no mortar. The sheer mass of these stones alone was enough to withstand the force of a flash flood, creating stable reservoirs that tamed the wild seasonal runoff. To move this water where it was needed, they engineered corbelled arch tunnels, driving them straight through hillsides. Each level of stone in these tunnels was set slightly inward from the one below, gradually leaning toward the center until the walls met overhead, forming an incredibly strong, triangular passage that could channel water for great distances under the immense weight of the earth above. The scale of these projects is almost incomprehensible. They required the coordinated labor of thousands, directed by the absolute authority of the Qanat, the Mycenaean king, whose power was measured not just in soldiers, but in his ability to command such vast resources for the public good. The enduring legacy of these megalithic waterworks is not merely in their stones, but in the profound understanding they represent. For the Mycenaeans, water was the most critical strategic resource, the key to both enduring peace and winning wars, and they built their resilience accordingly, crafting a landscape of conquest and survival from the bedrock up. Sometimes the most ambitious engineering projects began not with stone, but with simple wooden stakes driven into a soft lake bed. In the quiet marshlands of ancient Britain and the vast wetlands of Mesopotamia, communities were not just adapting to the water, they were building their own land directly atop it. These were the Cranogs, artificial islands constructed by piling stone, earth, and brush onto a framework of timber piles. The result was a stable, defensible platform rising from the water, a sanctuary that provided unparalleled access to fish, waterfowl, and the fertile soils of the reclaimed shoreline. A single family or a small clan could secure their safety and their sustenance in one brilliant move, creating a personal fortress surrounded by a natural moat. This same inventive spirit was channeled into carving new paths for commerce. Canals were dug not only to water fields but to connect entire worlds. By linking two separate rivers with a man-made waterway, these engineers effectively stitched together different regional economies. A trader could now float goods on a continuous aquatic highway, bypassing treacherous overland routes and unlocking the flow of pottery, metals, and ideas between previously isolated cultures. This was more than just digging a ditch. It was the birth of integrated trade networks, the Bronze Age equivalent of building an interstate system. Far to the east, along the Yellow River, Chinese communities took this principle of construction to its logical extreme. They began building massive earthen dikes to contain the river's powerful floods, not just for protection, but with a specific goal: to claim entirely new tracts of farmland from the river's own floodplain. They were actively redesigning the geography, pushing back the water to create valuable new land where none had existed before. This collective shift in strategy marks a critical turning point in human history. It was the moment we stopped seeing ourselves as mere participants in the landscape and began acting as its architects. With wood, stone, and sheer determination, these cultures demonstrated a newfound confidence, a belief that they could not only guide water, but could use it to draw a new map altogether. Yet these monumental achievements carried a hidden, long-term price. The very act of reshaping the landscape on such a grand scale introduced a new kind of vulnerability, one that unfolded so slowly it was likely invisible to the generations who first celebrated their success. In the sun-drenched fields of Mesopotamia, a quiet crisis was brewing beneath the soil. The intricate networks of canals that brought life-giving water to the crops also brought dissolved salts from the surrounding earth. Under the relentless sun, water would evaporate from the fields, but the salts remained, accumulating year after year, season after season. Over the centuries, this process transformed once dark and fertile soils into pale, cracked earth, glistening white under the sun. The land itself was slowly being poisoned by the very system designed to sustain it, and crop yields began a gradual but undeniable decline. This was not a swift punishment, but a slow-moving legacy passed down through the ages. The challenge was compounded by the need for vast quantities of timber to build their sluice gates, shore up canal banks, and fuel the fires of their metal workers. Entire forests were cleared from the hillsides. Without the deep root networks of trees to hold the soil in place, the uplands began to bleed earth. With every rain, more topsoil washed down from the denuded slopes, choking the carefully engineered canals with silt. This demanded constant, back-breaking labor to dredge the channels, a cycle of maintenance driven by an environmental change the engineers themselves had set in motion. Even the rivers themselves were not immune. Diverting water for a thriving upstream city meant that landscapes and communities further downstream could be left starved. Wetlands that once supported a rich tapestry of life slowly shrank, and the delicate balance of local ecosystems shifted in ways no one could have foreseen. These were not failures of intention, but the first large-scale examples of human innovation triggering complex environmental change. They stand as a profound, early lesson in a truth we are still grappling with today. Every intervention in the natural world, no matter how brilliant, sends ripples through a system far more complex than we can fully comprehend. The story of these ancient engineers is not just one of mastery, but also of unintended consequences, a reminder that our greatest ambitions must always be tempered with a deep respect for the intricate and interconnected world we inhabit. The authority to command a river's flow became the very source of a ruler's mandate. In the fertile yet volatile plains of ancient China, the Yellow River was both creator and destroyer, a force so immense that only a leader of legendary skill could hope to tame it. This is where myth and history converge in the story of Yu the Great, a figure revered not for conquest in battle, but for his mastery over water. Legends tell of how he spent 13 years dredging silt-choked channels and directing floodwaters to the sea, his hands calloused and his body weathered by the labor. His success in calming the waters did not just save crops, it forged a powerful, enduring idea that the right to govern was earned through service to the land and its people. This narrative established a sacred contract between ruler and river, one that would define Chinese statecraft for millennia. The emergence of the Urartu culture and the subsequent Shang dynasty saw this legend become a practical blueprint for power. These early states confronted the Yellow River's immense, silt-laden fury, a challenge that demanded more than a single village could provide. Organizing the labor to build and maintain massive earthen dikes and diversion channels required a centralized authority with the power to conscript thousands, manage food supplies, and direct the work across vast territories. This was not merely a public works project, it was the very engine of state formation. The technical necessity of controlling water created the administrative machinery of the first dynasties, cementing the power of a ruling elite who could claim they alone held the knowledge and mandate to keep the people safe from flood and famine. This profound fusion of water management and governance is known as hydraulic statecraft. It meant that an emperor's legitimacy was measured by the height of his dikes and the fertility of his fields. A well-maintained canal system was a symbol of a virtuous and capable ruler, while a devastating flood could be interpreted as a sign that the ruling family had lost the favor of heaven. This philosophy wove water control into the deepest fabric of Chinese political thought, creating a system where engineering, cosmology, and imperial power were inseparable. The Chinese case illuminates a universal truth with stunning clarity, that the most fundamental human challenge, the struggle for water, could shape not only the landscape but the very philosophy of power itself, laying a foundation for empire that would endure for thousands of years. But the true potential of water went far beyond simple nourishment. These ancient innovators made a conceptual leap that would echo for millennia, learning to capture the raw energy of a flowing stream. They began to harness the kinetic force of moving water itself. While the great water wheels of the Roman era are more famous, the fundamental principle likely took root in the Bronze Age. Picture a simple wooden wheel, its paddles dipping into a fast-moving creek. The current pushes against the paddles, causing the axle to turn, and this rotation could be transferred to grind grain between heavy stones. What had been a full day of back-breaking labor for a family could now be accomplished by the relentless, untiring power of the river. This was not just a convenience, it was a liberation of human effort, redirecting countless hours of work toward new crafts and ambitions. The same forceful logic was applied to the demanding work of mining. In a technique known as hushing, engineers would dam a stream high on a hillside, creating a large reservoir of water. When the dam was suddenly released, the resulting wave would thunder down the slope, scouring away soil and loose rock to expose valuable veins of metal ore hidden beneath. It was a form of natural hydraulic excavation on a massive scale. The controlled force of water could even power simple machinery. A cleverly designed water wheel might drive a set of bellows, creating a steady blast of air to superheat a smelting furnace or turn a lathe for polishing stone and wood. This represents one of the most pivotal shifts in all of human history. We moved from using water passively as a source of life to actively employing it as a tool of mechanical power. The gentle flow of a stream now held the latent energy to drive industry. In that simple turning wheel, we see the seed of every water turbine and generator to come, the quiet birth of an idea that would one day power the world. These lost landscapes leave behind a silent testimony, written not on parchment but in the earth itself. So how do we decipher this ancient language of soil and stone? The investigation begins from the sky, where aerial photography captures the land in a different light. Subtle discolorations in a field of wheat, a slight depression running in a perfectly straight line across a prairie. These are the ghost signatures of a buried canal, visible only from above. This high-tech detective work is taken even further with LIDAR, which stands for light detection and ranging. This laser scanning technology can peer straight through dense forest canopies, digitally stripping away the trees to reveal the ground beneath. What emerges is a stunningly detailed map of the ancient world, showing the long-lost contours of terraced hillsides, the geometric grids of forgotten field systems, and the faint but unmistakable paths of irrigation channels that have been invisible for 3,000 years. But seeing the shape of a system is one thing, proving its use is another. This is where geoarchaeology comes in, a science that reads the soil's own memory. Researchers take core samples, pulling long cylinders of earth from the ground like reading the rings of a tree. Deeper down, they might find a layer of soil rich with chemical traces like nitrogen, a lasting fingerprint of ancient fertilizers or the constant flow of nutrient-rich water. Sediment cores from nearby lake beds act as a historical record of the entire watershed. A sudden, thick layer of silt deposited all at once could tell a story of massive deforestation upstream, likely to provide timber for a major construction project, which led to the earth washing away. The study of ancient pollen, a field called palynology, adds another layer to the story. By identifying the types of pollen grains preserved in bogs and lake mud, scientists can track a dramatic shift in vegetation. A landscape once dominated by drought-resistant scrub brush might suddenly show a surge in pollen from water-intensive crops like barley or rice, a clear signal that irrigation had arrived and transformed the local ecology. Sometimes the most compelling evidence is an absence. A dry, sandy channel where a river clearly once flowed, now abandoned, points to a deliberate act of diversion, a massive engineering project that left one branch of the river to die and gave life to another. Piecing together these disparate clues is like solving a crime scene that is millennia old. Each soil sample, every laser scan, and all the preserved pollen grains are fragments of a story, a narrative of human ambition and environmental transformation waiting patiently in the ground for someone to learn how to read it. Beneath the Sardinian sun, the silent stone Nurag, he have long captured our imagination. But the island's true secret lies in what its people built downward into the earth. The Nuragic civilization did not just need water, they revered it, constructing what we now call well temples. These were far more than practical sources of drinking water. They were breathtaking subterranean cathedrals dedicated to the element of life itself. Imagine descending a perfectly crafted stone staircase into the cool, quiet darkness, your path leading ever downward toward a pool of impossibly clear water. The chamber housing this sacred source was often capped by a tholos dome, a beehive-shaped vault of meticulously fitted stones that rose without a single drop of mortar. This was engineering as an act of devotion. The precision of the dry stone construction was not merely for show. It created a stable, insulated environment that kept the water pure, cool, and protected from contamination. Every aspect of its design served both a physical and a spiritual purpose. The most profound mystery of these structures emerges from their alignments. On specific days of the year, often during the solstices or equinoxes, the sun would pierce the entrance shaft at just the right angle, its beam of light striking the still, dark surface of the water at the bottom. In that moment of celestial connection, the practical well transformed into a sophisticated astronomical instrument. It marked the turning of the seasons, a cosmic clock carved from stone and light. This tells us something vital about the Nuragic worldview. For them, there was no separation between the technical skill needed to access groundwater and the spiritual act of honoring it. The same hand that calculated the perfect slope for a staircase also aligned it with the heavens. The same mind that understood hydrology also sought communion with cosmic cycles. Drawing water was not a chore, it was a ritual that integrated their entire understanding of the world, from the physics of stone construction to the motion of the stars. In these sacred wells, we find no distinction between the engineer, the priest, and the astronomer. They were one and the same, their work a seamless fusion of earthly need and celestial wonder. The layout of a Bronze Age city reveals a philosophy where water was not an afterthought, but the central organizing principle. Entire street grids were engineered with a gentle, consistent slope, guiding rainwater and household waste into central gutters that ran like veins through the urban body. This was not haphazard drainage, but a deliberate system for public health, channeling potential contaminants away from living spaces and into designated outflow channels. At key intersections throughout the city, the community gathered at public fountains and cisterns. These were not hidden service points, but prominent civic features, ensuring that every citizen, regardless of status, had reliable access to the same clean water. In the most advanced of these early metropolises, canals were integrated as aquatic highways. Imagine a home with a back door opening not onto an alley, but onto a quiet waterway where goods could be loaded directly from a boat. This transformed the city into a multi-layered landscape of movement, with streets for people and canals for commerce flowing in parallel. The connection between water and authority was literally set in stone. The grandest structures, the temples and palaces, were almost invariably positioned to command the primary water sources. This was both a practical necessity, securing the supply for the elite and their retainers, and a powerful symbol. It visually reinforced the idea that spiritual and political power were inextricably linked to the benevolent control of this life-giving resource. The entire urban environment functioned as a single, cohesive hydraulic machine. This holistic approach resulted in cities that were remarkably functional, healthy, and even beautiful, with the sight and sound of flowing water woven into the daily experience of every inhabitant. It stands as a profound lesson in integrated design, a standard of urban livability born from the understanding that a city's true vitality flows from its most fundamental resource. This reliable control of water created the first economic surplus in human history. For the first time, a community could produce more food than it needed for mere day-to-day survival. This simple fact changed everything. That extra grain stored in vast central granaries meant that not every pair of hands was required for farming. Individuals were freed to specialize, to hone a single craft over a lifetime. One person could become a full-time potter, another a master metalworker, another a weaver of fine textiles. This division of labor was the true engine of civilization, and it was powered entirely by the predictable harvests that irrigation made possible. The wealth generated by these water-fed fields did not just sit in storage. It became the capital that built empires. The surplus grain could be traded, or it could be used to pay the workers who raised monumental walls and towering temples. It fed the standing armies that protected trade routes and projected a ruler's power. The entire political and military structure of the early states rested on this agricultural foundation. But the water did more than just grow the wealth, it also provided the means to move it. Canals and managed rivers became the superhighways of the ancient world. A single wooden barge poled along a calm canal could carry the grain of 100 donkey carts. This made the large-scale trade of heavy, bulky goods not just possible but practical. Timber from the mountains, stone from distant quarries, and ingots of precious copper and tin could now flow between cities, fueling further specialization and innovation. Control over these aquatic highways became the ultimate strategic prize. A city that commanded a critical river junction or a vital canal network held immense economic power. It could tax the goods flowing through its territory, growing rich from the commerce of others. It is no surprise then that so many early conflicts were fought over water access and trade routes. To control the water was to control the lifeblood of the economy itself. This direct link between hydrological engineering and economic power created a virtuous cycle. The more stable the water supply, the greater the agricultural surplus. The greater the surplus, the more wealth and labor available for even grander water projects. This self-reinforcing cycle funded an explosion of cultural and technological advancement, laying the groundwork for the world we know today. The Hittite Empire rose from a landscape of stoic plateaus and unforgiving seasons, where water was not a given but a prize to be won. Their capital, Hattusa, was a marvel of urban planning perched in the Anatolian highlands, a location that presented a constant hydrological puzzle. The solution was carved directly into the earth surrounding the city, a series of massive, meticulously lined reservoirs. These were not simple ponds, but vast, artificial lakes designed to capture and store every precious drop of seasonal rainfall and spring melt. They guaranteed that even through the long, dry summer, the city's thousands of inhabitants and the livestock vital to their economy would never go thirsty. This was the first layer of a brilliant, multi-faceted water strategy. To fill these reservoirs and protect their farmlands, Hittite engineers became masters of controlling sudden, violent flash floods. They constructed formidable dams using a composite technique of earth and stone, creating barriers strong enough to withstand a wall of water rushing down from the mountains. These dams did more than just block. They transformed destructive torrents into productive, placid lakes that could be tapped for irrigation, turning volatile water into a predictable, manageable resource. The importance of this infrastructure was so profound that it was encoded into law. Royal inscriptions and detailed clay tablets survive, recording decrees that ordered the maintenance and repair of canals and dams. Neglecting this duty was not a minor oversight. It was an act against the state itself, a clear indication of how deeply water security was tied to the empire's stability. This systematic control extended to the realm of defense. Fortresses and military outposts were strategically positioned to command the high ground over springs and river crossings. In this semi-arid world, an army without water was an army defeated. By securing every major water source, the Hittites could effectively control the movement of both their own troops and any potential invaders, turning hydrology into a weapon of grand strategy. Their entire empire, therefore, was built on a foundation of water wisdom. It was this engineered resilience, this ability to thrive in an environment that seemed to resist permanent settlement, that allowed their centralized power to endure for centuries. The Hittites demonstrate with stunning clarity that imperial might was not only measured in soldiers and swords, but in the quiet, constant flow of water through stone channels, and the deep, still reserves that guaranteed life would continue. A city's walls were only as strong as its most vulnerable point, and nothing was more critical than its water supply. Bronze Age planners understood this fundamental truth, weaving hydrology directly into their military architecture. They did not simply build fortresses near water, they engineered the water itself into a formidable defensive barrier. By carefully diverting rivers or channeling seasonal streams, they sculpted wide, water-filled moats that encircled their most important citadels. These were not mere decorative ponds, but calculated obstacles that forced any approaching army into a narrow, easily defended front, turning a simple wall into a complex hydrological puzzle for an attacker to solve. The most secure strongholds took this principle even further, constructed on rocky outcrops that contained their own secret springs or vast rock-cut cisterns. These internal water sources were the key to surviving a prolonged siege, even if an enemy army camped outside the gates for months, cutting off every external stream and well. The defenders within could hold out, their independence guaranteed by the foresight of their engineers. There are even tantalizing clues from a few sites suggesting the existence of complex sluice gates built into defensive earthworks. In a moment of dire need, these gates could theoretically be opened, releasing a controlled deluge to swamp the primary approach routes, turning the landscape itself into a weapon against the invaders. This strategic mindset influenced the very location of cities. A settlement was ideally placed on a defensible rise, close enough to a river for daily needs, but not so close that its banks became a weak point in its perimeter. Every decision reflected a deep, multifaceted understanding of the environment. Water was no longer just a resource to be consumed. It was an active, fluid component of a city's defensive scheme. This brilliant fusion of civil engineering and military science reveals a society that saw the natural world not as a separate realm, but as an arsenal of potential allies, each river and spring offering its own unique form of protection to those clever enough to command it. Yet their greatest strength also contained a hidden fragility. Around 1200 BCE, a wave of instability swept across the civilized world, and the intricate water networks that had sustained empires became their Achilles' heel. A shifting climate marked by prolonged droughts and unpredictable rainfall placed these hydrological marvels under a stress they were never designed to bear. The very rivers that fed the Qanats and canals began to shrink, their flows diminishing year after year. Reservoirs that once brimmed with life-giving water now revealed cracked, dry beds. As the vital flow ebbed, the finely tuned balance of the entire system began to unravel. Canals, deprived of their steady current, choked with silt, their carefully engineered slopes rendered useless. The agricultural surplus that fed cities, paid soldiers, and supported specialized craftsmen simply vanished. What followed was a cascade of failure. Famine strained the social fabric, and the collective labor required to maintain miles of earthworks became impossible to muster. The complex interdependence that had been a source of resilience in good times now became a vector for collapse. A breach in one canal could doom downstream farms, and a failing spring could depopulate an entire city. The centralized authorities that had commanded these vast projects found their legitimacy evaporating along with the water. This period offers a profound lesson in the limits of human ingenuity. It reminds us that even the most brilliant engineering is a partnership with the natural world, utterly dependent on a stable climate and a cohesive society to maintain it. The silent, crumbling canals stand as a monument not to failure, but to a delicate balance lost, a warning that our own complex systems are tethered to the same fragile forces. Their story is a quiet testament to the power of human ingenuity, a reminder that our drive to shape the world is as ancient as civilization itself. From the life-giving Qanats of Persia to the elegant plumbing of the Minoans, these forgotten engineers achieved something profound. They did not seek to conquer the natural world with brute force, but to understand its rhythms and work in concert with them. Their greatest innovation was not a specific tool, but a mindset, a deep-seated patience, and a willingness to learn from the land. They proved that the most powerful technology is often the simplest, guided by observation and a profound respect for the forces of gravity and water. Their legacy is literally carved into the earth, in the terraced hillsides and the dry riverbeds that still trace the paths of their ancient canals. As we confront our own complex environmental challenges, from managing water scarcity to building resilient cities, their forgotten triumphs offer a powerful blueprint. They remind us that sustainable solutions are born from collaboration, from a long-term perspective, and from the wisdom of designing with nature, not against it. The quiet patience of the Bronze Age holds an urgent message for our modern world, urging us to build a future that is not just technologically advanced, but equally wise and enduring.